Hi friends, what's up? It's Jessica. I'm about to make some kombucha tea and I want to show you exactly how I do that, and I'll share a few things that I've learned about kombucha. So first off, what is kombucha? It's a beverage that has become more popular in the US recently. Basically, it's a drink that's made from fermented tea with sugar and a probiotic culture. People have been making kombucha for thousands of years. In China, I've heard that it was a tradition for the kombucha culture to be passed down through generations in a family. So people have been enjoying this beverage for a long time. I recently just got into making kombucha. There's a number of reasons why I choose to drink it. First off, for health benefits that it provides. A lot of studies have been done on the benefits of drinking tea, especially green tea. It's very high in antioxidants and polyphenols. Tea has been shown to have anti-cancer properties. It may improve cholesterol levels. It may help to control blood sugar, and it may improve liver health as well. With kombucha, you're getting the health benefits of tea, plus it's a fermented drink, so it has probiotics. And as we're learning, probiotics have a profound effect on health, not just our digestion, but our immune system. People say it helps with weight loss and inflammation in the body, and the list goes on. Some of the other byproducts of the fermentation process include acetic acid. Acetic acid will kill harmful microorganisms, but it doesn't touch the organisms that you're growing in your culture, which are well adapted to that acidic environment. There are other health benefits as well. Those are some of the main ones. In addition to health, I like to drink it because I like the taste. And when I make it from home, I can flavor it how I want. I have more control over the flavor and suiting it to my tastes. I like that kombucha tea can be a replacement for other drinks that might not be so healthy, maybe alcoholic drinks or soda pop, and things with more sugar or more calories. So those are just some reasons why I like kombucha. I do want to talk about a few cautions, especially when you're making kombucha at home. That's probably good to be aware of. First of all, it's a fermented drink. There is some alcohol in it. Obviously, it's not going to be as much as other alcoholic drinks like beer, wine, but the stuff that you make at home might have more alcohol in it than what's produced commercially because they're required to keep the alcohol content below a certain level. Another ingredient in kombucha tea is the sugar. It needs that, so there is sugar in the drink. But as it ferments, those microorganisms are feeding on the sugar, and that reduces the sugar significantly, but there is still going to be some sugar in there. You can kind of control the amount of sugar depending on how long it's fermented, but it's something to be aware of. Another thing, of course, is caffeine content. We're using tea. Tea has caffeine. Again, not as much as some other caffeinated drinks, but there's still going to be caffeine in it. Another thing to be aware of is preparing the kombucha properly at home. You don't want it to get contaminated. You don't want anything harmful growing in there. You have to be aware of the proper process for that and keeping things clean and minimizing any risks. That's like preparing any kind of food at home. And one more thing, I highly recommend avoiding prolonged contact with metal. The kombucha is going to become very acidic if it's done properly, and if metal is in contact with that acid, it's going to start leaching. Especially be aware of metals that are more reactive, like aluminum. Another thing is improperly manufactured ceramic pots. Lead can leach out of the glaze. So I use glass for the fermentation process, and that's what I would recommend. All right, I think I'm ready to get started. I'm going to show you what materials I use to brew kombucha at home. So let's take a look. One thing I'll be using is a large pot. This one is 6 quarts. I also have a large glass jar. This is a gallon-sized jar. I'll also be needing some kind of tightly woven material, but that's also breathable. I would not recommend cheesecloth for this. It's not quite tightly woven enough, but you could use tea towels, paper towels, or even coffee filters. And you'll need a rubber band for securing the material. I also recommend pH test strips, ones that will give a reading in the acid range. So this one starts at 0 and goes up to 6. Another important ingredient is tea. You can use tea bags or loose leaf tea like I got here. If you have the loose leaf, you probably need some kind of tea strainer. I recommend organic tea. That way you're limiting the pesticides and other chemicals that you're exposed to, and it's going to give you a higher quality kombucha. So I have 2 tablespoons here of tea. You can use white tea, green tea, or black tea. This is a blend of green and black. I avoid any teas that are going to have oils in them, like Earl Grey, or any kind of flavorings, because that can affect your success with fermentation. I also have some cane sugar here. Again, I recommend organic cane sugar. And I'm using 1 cup of the organic cane sugar. And I'll be using some water. Make sure it's clean water. You could probably use spring water. I have filtered water, but you'll want to make sure there's no chlorine or anything in the water that's going to interfere with you being able to grow your culture. For the water, I'm using about 14 cups of water. I'm going to use 4 cups at room temperature and then 10 cups of cold water, and I'll show you why I do that. It's kind of a shortcut. Now I'm also going to need 2 cups of starter tea. So this is a batch of kombucha tea that I brewed, and I'll use 2 cups from this to get my next batch started. If you don't have starter tea, you can use distilled white vinegar. The other important thing you'll need is culture. It is called a SCOBY, S-C-O-B-Y, and that stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. It's exactly what that is. This kind of jelly looking thing floating at the top of my jar. Kombucha tea is sometimes called kombucha mushroom tea. I think it's called that because the SCOBY kind of resembles a mushroomy type organism. This is what you'll need for a good healthy fermentation process. So if you don't have one, you can buy them, or if you know someone who brews kombucha, they will eventually get extra because it does keep growing. Now, if you want to do a second fermentation, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. You'll need some type of brewing bottle like this one, or some type of airtight container to put the kombucha in. Other optional ingredients would be any kind of flavorings. So if you want to put some fruit in there, if you want your kombucha tea to be a little sweeter, but maybe don't want the sugar, you can ferment it a little longer and then maybe add some stevia in. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. I mentioned earlier a little shortcut with the water, and that's what I'm doing here. Since this recipe will fit in this gallon-sized jar, you can imagine boiling 14 cups of water and then letting that cool to room temperature. That's going to take a while. So this is a quicker way I found of doing this. I'm going to boil 4 cups of water. We'll just let this come to a boil and then turn off the heat. Then I add the tea. That's 2 tablespoons of my blend of green and black tea. And I'm going to let the tea steep for about 10 minutes. Once that's done, I'll remove the tea. Then I add my 1 cup of organic cane sugar, stir that in, and allow it to dissolve completely. Now I'm going to take my sugary sweet tea and pour it into my glass jar. Now here's where I add the 10 cups of cold water. This will bring the temperature down quickly, and it's important that the temperature is about room temperature, or at least below 80 degrees. Once it's below 80 degrees, I can add my SCOBY and my 2 cups of starter tea. Now I'm going to add my material to cover the jar to act as a breathable lid for my jar. I'll secure it with the rubber band. This allows the kombucha to breathe. It allows gases to escape from the jar while it's fermenting, but it prevents insects or dust or other contaminants from getting inside the jar. I'm going to let my kombucha sit at room temperature for about a week. And after that week, I can start taste testing it and allow it to get to the level of sourness that I prefer. This is where I like to test with my pH strips, and I want to make sure that the pH is below 3. That's going to help prevent any unwanted organisms from growing in my kombucha. When my fermentation is done, I'm going to save my SCOBY and 2 cups of the tea to start my next batch of kombucha. I also talked about an optional second ferment. When the kombucha is done with the first ferment in the large glass jar, if you want, you can do a second ferment in brewing bottles or some type of airtight container. And this is where it starts to become carbonated or fizzy. This is a time to add any flavorings. I'm going to be adding some different fruits. I have pomegranates, I have some Asian pears, and I have persimmons. So I'll try those out. If you like the kombucha to be a little sweeter, but you don't want that extra sugar, you can allow it to ferment longer. It'll be more sour, but you can add in a natural sweetener like stevia so that you don't have all that sugar in there. When you're doing the second ferment, you're going to want to release pressure in the bottles. So open them and kind of burp them, so to speak, to allow gases to escape so that that pressure doesn't build up too much in those airtight containers. The second ferment usually takes 1 or 2 weeks. And after that, you can chill your kombucha tea and then enjoy it. I want to thank you so much for joining me as I made my kombucha. I'm glad you got to meet my SCOBY. I love my SCOBY. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch and like and share these videos. I appreciate your comments as well. And don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.